The first law of thermodynamics says that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. This law is also known as the law of conservation of energy. We now know that the measurable energy in the material universe is just one form of energy, and that consciousness is a higher form of energy. According to the law of correspondence, reality exists in planes or dimensions. We have the material plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane. And within each plane, we have varying degrees of planes or existence. Every law or reality on one plane has its counterpart on all other planes. The law of correspondence is a hermetic law that was taught and applied by the Egyptian masters of over 5,000 years ago. Its shortened form is often quoted as follows: as above, so below; as within, so without. The religious equivalent of the law of correspondence is found in Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 1, verse 20, which reads, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." In the first letter of John, chapter 4, verse 17, we find another rendering of this law in these words: "Because as he is, so are we in this world." Quantum physics has now caught up with the law of correspondence, reason why we now have the theories of known locality, quantum entanglement, and parallel universes. All things are one thing, experiencing itself on different planes and unfolding toward infinite self-expression or glory. By recognizing that consciousness is a mental equivalent of physical energy, we can apply the law of correspondence to the law of conservation of energy as follows: consciousness is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes from one form to another. Consciousness, in its absolute, pure, and unconditioned state, is the being we call God or Spirit. When consciousness steps down into human experience, it becomes a soul. The soul is therefore a spirit that is conditioned by an identity and the memory of all the experiences it has been through for all eternity. The collective consciousness of all of humanity constitutes the soul of the universe. It is the sea of consciousness from which all humans drink. The collective consciousness of a race or tribe constitutes the soul of that tribe. The racial or tribal consciousness exists like a tide within the ocean of human consciousness. The collective consciousness of a family constitutes the soul of that family. The family consciousness exists like a wave within the tide of a tribal consciousness. The consciousness of a person constitutes the soul of that person. The individual consciousness exists like a splash within the wave of family consciousness. Your daily experiences are like water bubbles that emerge from the continuum of consciousness to give you a sense of being in this space-time present moment reality. You manifest what you are, not what you want. According to scientific evidence, our universe has been here for billions of years, and human civilization has existed for millions of years. The problem is that with the tools we now have at our disposal, We have been able to trace and document human history only as far back as 3,500 years before Christ. Let me say this again. Humanity has existed for millions of years, but with all our knowledge, we have a record of just the last 5,000 years. And it is not even an accurate record. History is more fiction than fact. History is composed by connecting the dots of evidence we have found and then weaving a theory or narrative to suit it. We read history as if it is a live football match being reported by some gigantic journalist in the sky. This is a misconception, and it screws up our life in many ways. The invention of writing dates back to the Sumerian cuneiform and the Egyptian hieroglyphics of 3,000 years before Christ. The so-called father of history is a Greek historian, Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century before Christ. So how did he, his peers, and his followers after him create a record of what happened for 4,500 years of our current civilization before he was born, and from then till now? They did this by creating scientific models into which they fit the available evidence, connect the dots, and write a story. If you are from Africa, then you also know that the history of Africa that is taught by the colonial curricula in our schools is the European version of African history, not the authentic African history. The fact of life is that he who controls the narrative controls the souls of men, because the soul is a spiritual river that flows along the channels of belief. My goal today is to get you to be more skeptical about the things you read in books and watch on the media, and become more confident about the silent whispers of your own soul. The soul within you is a splash that is interacting with this space-time present moment dimension from the wave of family consciousness, which has its being in the tide of racial and tribal consciousness, which has its being in the collective consciousness of humanity, which in turn has its being in pure consciousness, O God. Consciousness is never created or destroyed. It only changes from one form to another. Secondly, consciousness exists beyond the domain of space and time. It is the sea of life within which you have an eternal connection. Thus, through the window of your soul, you have direct access to all the collective experiences of your loved ones, your tribe, your race, all of humanity, and all the fullness of God. Why is this a crucial revelation? The ancient mystical truths by which the civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, Native America, and Peru were built is a deposit of wisdom that has been retained within the racial consciousness of these people and transmitted down the ages through the souls of every child born into these races. Even more powerful than archaeological findings, carvings, paintings, and books, this spirit is the essence of the cultures, traditions, rituals, folk tales, and oral traditions that are handed from one generation to another. The Europeans who studied these mysteries and tried to explain them through their own cultural mental models will never get anywhere near the soul that was born into these cultures and is aware of itself. Within your soul right now lies a mystery far greater than the pyramids and temples of Egypt. Wake up to the magic of your inner essence. Reconnect yourself with the invisible treasure that is now at your disposal in the form of the wisdom and power that built the pyramids. Tap from this source and you will build your life into a legacy that is far greater than the pyramids. You are right now a temple of wisdom. The secret and power you are searching for is not to be found in books, mosques, temples, churches, and shrines. It is within you. This is not a religious claim. I have presented you with empirical evidence for this so that you will have the logical basis for your self-confidence. With this confidence, I invite you to proceed with faith and build the life of your dreams. I am Godfrey Esoh. Thank you for following this episode of Raptures of Inspiration.